Welcome to the Explainer. So today we're going to dive into this hidden force, something that connects, huge historical events, deep science, and even the story of your own life. It's all about these tiny, tiny moments, the kind that you barely even notice, but have the power to change, well, pretty much everything.
I mean, just think about that for a second. What if everything we know, our entire world, is balanced on a single moment? We tend to think of history as this big, inevitable story, right? Filled with these epic battles and world-changing decisions. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if the world we live in today is actually built on a series of tiny accidents, near misses, moments that were balanced on a razor's edge?
All right, so let's start right there with history on a knife's edge. We're going to look at just a few moments, these really fragile points in time where one tiny little change could have sent the whole timeline flying off in a completely different direction.
Okay, first up, 1776. I want you to picture this. George Washington's army is totally trapped in Brooklyn. The American Revolution, it's pretty much about to be snuffed out before it even gets started. And then, just like that, out of nowhere, this incredibly dense fog rolls in. It was a total fluke, right? A random weather event. But it was just enough to hide their escape across the river from the British. Seriously, without that fog, the whole American experiment might have been over, right then and there.
Okay, now let's jump way forward to 1939. There's this carpenter, George Elser, and he plants a bomb in a beer hall. It's perfectly timed to go off right in the middle of a speech by Adolf Hitler. But for some reason, maybe bad weather, Hitler cuts his speech short and leaves the building just 13 minutes. 13 minutes before the bomb goes off. Think about that. A tiny shift in a schedule, and it might have completely changed the path of the Second World War.
And this one is maybe the most chilling of all. It's 1983. We're deep in the Cold War. Inside a secret Soviet command center, alarms just start screaming. The system says multiple nuclear missiles are on their way from the US. Now the protocol, the rules, they were crystal clear. Launch an immediate massive retaliatory strike. But the officer in charge, Stanislav Petrov, he just had a feeling, a gut feeling that it was all a mistake. He went against everything he was trained to do, and that one's doubt, his single decision, stopped what would have been a full-blown nuclear holocaust.
So you've got a fog bank, a last-minute schedule change, one guy's gut feeling. It all feels like pure random chance, right? Just dumb luck. But what if it's not? What if these aren't just weird quirks of fate? What if these stories are actually pointing to a really deep scientific principle? One that explains this incredible fragility in not just history, but in, well, everything.
Okay, to really get this, we need to switch gears a little bit, from history to the weather, of all things. We're going to go from looking at what happened to understanding why it happens. And to do that, we have to dive into the absolutely fascinating and kind of mind-bending world of chaos theory.
So back in the 1960s, there was this meteorologist, Edward Lorenz, and he's running these early computer models to predict the weather. One day, to save a little time, he re-enters some data from a previous run, but he rounds it off. Just a tiny, tiny bit. I mean, an error of less than 1/1000%. It should have made no difference at all. But what he saw was astonishing. The long-term forecast was completely, wildly different. And this tiny accident led him to this now famous, almost poetic idea, which of course we now call the butterfly effect.
And this beautiful thing you're looking at, this is the Lorenz attractor. It's basically a picture of what one of these chaotic systems looks like. Now here's the part that'll bake your noodle a little bit. That path looks totally random, right? Completely unpredictable. But it's actually generated by a set of incredibly simple, deterministic mathematical rules. It's this perfect, stunning visual of order hidden deep inside of chaos. It's a system that's following the rules perfectly, yet you have absolutely no way of predicting where it's going to go next.
And this gets us to the absolute core of the whole idea. It's got a fancy scientific name: sensitive dependence on initial conditions. I know, it's a mouthful, but the concept behind it is actually really simple and incredibly powerful. It just means that in any complex system, like the weather or the stock market or human life, the tiniest, almost undetectable change at the very beginning can get magnified over time, leading to huge, totally unpredictable differences later on.
This image illustrates it perfectly. Just look at these two forecasts. On top, you can see all the different possible outcomes are staying pretty close together. It's more or less predictable. But look at the bottom graph. Start with just a slightly different set of initial conditions, and boom, the possibilities fly apart into total chaos. You can't predict a thing. That's the butterfly effect in action. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting, because this isn't just about weather patterns or big historical moments. This whole principle, it's happening right now, inside your own head. There is a butterfly in your brain, and it is a powerful force that is constantly shaping who you are and where your life is headed.
When we talk about the butterfly effect in psychology, we're talking about how the smallest, most insignificant seeming things you do, a thought you have that lasts for a second, a tiny decision you make, even just the way you talk to yourself in your head, how all of that can set off a chain reaction. These little things build on each other, and they can end up completely changing the entire course of your life.
So how does this actually play out? Well, it can be a pretty simple chain of events. It all starts with just one small shift in how you think about something. That little mental shift makes it easier to try a new behavior. And if you keep doing that new thing, it slowly starts to change how you see yourself, your own self-worth. And once that happens, well, that's when your whole life can start moving in a new direction.
And we're not talking about making some huge, dramatic life change here. These are the psychological butterflies. Things like, just for a second, challenging a belief you've had forever. Or changing the tone of that little voice in your head. For example, let's say you decide to go for just a 5-minute walk today. That's it. But then you do it again tomorrow. Suddenly it's a habit. That little bit of exercise gives you more energy, which makes you feel a little more confident at work. So you speak up in a meeting when you normally wouldn't. Someone important notices, and you get put on a new project. And just like that, your whole career path has changed, all from a 5-minute walk. These tiny actions, when you repeat them, literally rewire your brain, creating new pathways that can make things that once felt impossible start to feel totally normal.
Okay, so this leads to a really big, fascinating question. If our lives are this chaotic, this sensitive to the smallest little nudge, how do we function? How do we make any sense of it all? How do we live with the knowledge that anything could change at any moment? Well, it turns out our brains have a built-in tool for this. It's called counterfactual thinking, which is just a fancy way of saying we ask, what if, all the time. You know exactly what I'm talking about. What if I'd taken that other job? What if I'd said yes instead of no? What if I'd never met that person? We are constantly running these little simulations in our heads, imagining different versions of our past to try and understand the present we're living in.
And this is where the work of psychologist Dan McAdams comes in. He argues that our #1 tool for dealing with all this chaos is story. We are storytellers. It's just what we do. And the most important, most powerful story any of us will ever tell is the story of ourselves. We take all the random, chaotic, unpredictable moments of our lives and we string them together into a plot that makes sense.
This process creates what he calls our narrative identity. And it's so much more than just a list of memories, right? It's the story of you, and it's always changing, always evolving. It's the way you connect the dots looking backward and how you imagine the path forward to give your life a sense of meaning, a purpose. Essentially, it's our superpower. It's how we draw a nice, straight, logical line through a life that's actually just a series of chaotic, unpredictable butterfly effects. We create order from the beautiful mess.
So this brings us to the final question, the big one. What is your life story? When you think about all this, how you see yourself, your place in this wildly unpredictable world, if one tiny moment can change everything, then who are you, really?
And I guess that's the thought I want to leave you with. Maybe who you are, your identity, isn't some solid, fixed thing that's always been there. Maybe you are the story, the heroic narrative that you create to make sense of it all. The story you choose to tell yourself to find meaning in a world that is constantly, profoundly, and forever being shaped by the flap of a butterfly's wings.